Dr. Fauci, as you are aware, it is a crime to lie to Congress. Section 1001 of the U.S. Criminal Code creates a felony and a 5-year penalty for lying to Congress. On your last trip to our committee on May 11th, you stated that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And yet, gain-of-function research was done entirely in the Wuhan Institute by Dr. Shi and was funded by the NIH. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the Wuhan virology paper entitled Discovery of a Rich Gene Pool of Bat SARS-Related Coronaviruses. Please deliver a copy of the journal article to Dr. Fauci. In this paper, Dr. Shi credits the NIH and lists the actual number of the grant that she was given by the NIH. In this paper, she took 2 bat coronavirus genes, spike genes, and combined them with a SARS-related backbone to create new viruses that are not found in nature. These lab-created viruses were then shown to replicate in humans. These experiments combined genetic information from different coronaviruses that infect animals but not humans to create novel artificial viruses able to infect human cells. Viruses that in nature only infect animals were manipulated in the Wuhan lab to gain the function of infecting humans. This research fits the definition of the research that the NIH said was subject to the pause in 2014 to 2017, a pause in funding on gain of function. But the NIH failed to recognize this, defines it away, and it never came under any scrutiny. Dr. Richard E. Bright, a molecular biologist from Rutgers, described this research in Wuhan as the Wuhan lab used NIH funding to construct novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses able to infect human cells and laboratory animals. This is high-risk research that creates new potential pandemic pathogens that exist only in the lab, not in nature. This research matches, these are Dr. E. Bright's words, this research matches, indeed epitomizes, the definition of gain-of-function research done entirely in Wuhan, for which there was supposed to be a federal pause. Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Your microphone.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get
NIH,
one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2, that's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports that were published in the literature, It is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those
It
viruses
is-
caused it.
it
No
is
one is alleging that
molecularly-
those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That
You
is
can't
not-
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not
Paul,
obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible
No one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
they're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And
won't
you
admit the truth.
and you
Senator
implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent
could
that.
have
And
been.
if
And it
anybody
could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Senator Smith.
Reserving the right to object, I joined the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in being supportive of Iron Dome, but I think it should be paid for. I think the American taxpayer dollars that pay for it should come from money that could go to the Taliban. There's a fund with over $6 billion in it that was designated for the Afghan government, and that money, I think, could be spent on the Taliban if we do not rescind that money. The justification for my proposal for paying this is simple. Only an economically strong United States can be a militarily strong ally of Israel. I support Israel. I voted for hundreds of millions of dollars to support Iron Dome. I'm glad the United States has a strong bond with Israel. But the United States cannot give money it does not have, no matter how strong our relationship is. The United States is approaching $30 trillion in debt. Our out-of-control spending added $3 trillion to the debt just in this fiscal year. A day of reckoning is coming, sooner than you think. Interest on the debt will be larger than what we spend on national defense in just a few years. If the debt weakens us to the point where we have difficulty funding our own military needs, how can the United States continue to be a reliable ally to Israel? Getting our fiscal house in order does not mean that we are failing to support Israel. Far from it. The $1 billion under consideration today is on top of the more than $1.6 billion the U.S. has already given for Iron Dome, and that's not all. The U.S. provides Israel with just under $4 billion in aid annually. To date, the United States has provided over $146 billion in aid to Israel. In addition to Iron Dome, the U.S. has helped Israel fund other missile defense systems as well. We spent $2 billion on David's Sling and $3.7 billion on Arrow programs. That means the United States has contributed over $7 billion to Israel's missile defense system. Iron Dome is an indispensable defensive tool. That not only saves Israeli lives, but Palestinian lives. I want an Israel strong enough so that it does not have to rely on American support. But if we are here to add an additional $1 billion in aid, all I ask is that we make sure that it is paid for. My amendment would rescind $6 billion in Afghanistan reconstruction money that otherwise might go to the Taliban. Secretary Blinken said as recently as 2 weeks ago that this money may well go to the new Taliban government. Under this arrangement, we would devote $1 billion to Israel's Iron Dome and return the rest to Treasury. This is clear to all of the Republicans. So it needs to be very clear today that Republicans support paying for Iron Dome, and they support paying for Iron Dome with taking away money that would go to the Taliban. I hope my colleagues will work with me to strengthen Israel, strengthen the United States, and strengthen our alliance. I ask for unanimous consent that the senator modify his request so that instead of his proposal, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar item number 140, H.R. 5323. Further, that the only amendment in order to be my substitute amendment, which is at the desk, I further ask that there be 2 hours of debate equally divided between the two leaders or their designees. Upon the use or yielding back of that time, the Paul substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to. The bill as amended be considered read a third time, and the Senate vote on passage of the bill or as amended with no intervening action or debate. Madam President, reserving the right to object, I think it is very clear and very important that it be very clear that I've offered to fully pay for the Iron Dome system, with an extra $1 billion. The objection is coming from the Democrat side. They're objecting to it being paid for. We've offered this fund of $6 billion. We've offered to modify it and make it less, so there would still be some remaining money in this system. We've offered other funds. We've offered a basically open invitation to the other side that we just think it ought to be paid for. So the objection from the other side is to paying for Iron Dome, to paying for the $1 billion. Interestingly, aid is already going to Afghanistan while the Taliban is in charge. Now, allegedly, that aid is going to charitable organizations, but the history of the Taliban has been to withhold, control, manipulate, and corrupt charitable organizations as well. I think it's a mistake to have money already flowing into the new government under the Taliban and to charitable organizations, because it basically makes their job easier and will make the public more pacified if they're being fed by the Western world. They wouldn't be as happy if the money's being destroyed and it's chaos. So really, in some ways, you do help to stabilize the Taliban by sending more money into there. But Secretary Blinken was asked this very question in committee by myself. Can you guarantee that this $6 billion will not be released at any time to the Taliban? And he said no. The implication being that if the Taliban behaves, he sees this $6 billion going to the Taliban. I think it's a big mistake. This is a big issue. Iron Dome is a big issue, but it's also a big issue whether we send money to the Taliban. They already have $80 billion worth of our weapons. I think it would be a real big mistake to send money indirectly or directly to the Taliban, so I object.